of performance and giving them practical tools to gain a competitive mental edge. It's with great pleasure I introduce to you to talk about the challenges in coaching today's young athlete, Chris Stretch.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Chris Stretch. I'm a peak performance coach. I'm also a licensed psychotherapist and a speaker. I love speaking, so this gives me an awesome opportunity to speak about something I'm very passionate about. So today I'm going to talk about the challenge of coaching the young athlete today. And the reason why I think this is a very important topic to discuss is because I think it's very important that we acknowledge the dynamic change in our youth, say since 2007. I mean, I think gradually it was happening. There's two different factors here. First, we have technology. 2007, you have the iPhone release. You have screens, available ASAP. You have instant gratification for kids. And I think what's also changed is we've gone from a culture where kids were seen and not heard to very seen and very heard. I mean, if you're like me, you maybe grew up in an environment where fear was a part of parenting, and if you acted out, you got that was taken care of. That's not happening so much today. Kids are very seen, they're very heard, they're very loud, they're very boisterous. But also, in addition to that, with technology, this idea of patience, this idea of waiting for things to happen, it's not really there as much anymore. I mean, think about being a 5 and a 6 and a 7-year-old kid. I mean, back when I grew up, if I went to a restaurant with my parents, I had to sit there and I had to wait. And I had to play with my brother or my sister. I maybe got a special menu where I could color and play tic-tac-toe. But I didn't get to look at what I wanted to look at the second that I sat down at the dinner table. Imagine being 5, 6, 7, and 8. And these are not bad parents. These are the majority of parents. Sit down, hey, there's an iPad, there's an iPhone right in front of you. So what does this mean, and why is this relevant to coaching today's athlete? Because to me, if any of us, or the majority of us, grew up in that environment, you know what we would be? We would be entitled. And that's what's going on. Kids are entitled today, and I would be entitled too. I'm already entitled, self-proclaimed, and I would be way more entitled. But what's worse than entitled players and entitled kids are entitled adults. Because if you think about what entitlement means a demand, a right that I have things the way that I want them. And guess what? When I demand that I don't have to coach entitled kids, I'm entitled. When I demand that kids be a way that I want them, instead of the way that they are, I'm entitled. And I am very guilty of this, as well as a lot of the different coaches that I've worked with, where we sit around and we talk about how terrible this new cohort of kids is and how difficult they are to coach. Well, here's the big problem with that, is that when I'm doing that, I'm going to have a very hard time connecting with these kids, because the solution that I'm going to present is this idea that was brought by Timothy Galloway, who is the author of The Inner Game of Tennis and The Inner Game of Golf. And what he talks about is, if you imagine a line graph, an XY graph, right? And the x-axis is perceived care. The key word is perceived care. And that kids perceive that you care about them. Now, again, the key word is perception, because I've worked with a team where the coach, if you looked at her bio in the program, it was like, I love these kids are great, my heart goes out to them. But yet, talking to one of her players, it was, I believe the quote was, we felt like we were a spoke in the wheel of her machine. So you can think that you care about your athletes as much as you want. If they don't perceive that you care about them, it's not going to get you anywhere, okay? So on one axis, you have perceived care. On the other axis, you have accountability. Holding players accountable for their work ethic, for their attitude, being tough on them. Well, the more you get PC, the more you can do AC, okay? The more you get perceived care, more the kids feel like you care and you love them and you want to connect with them. And I think one of the key principles is making my desire to connect as a coach more important than my desire to control as a coach. And I think you can plug that into parenting. When I work with a lot of parents, when my desire to control supersedes my desire to connect, I'm going to have a tough time, and the longevity of that relationship is going to be threatened. So the more my players perceive that I care about them, the more I can be tough on them, the more I can run them when they make mistakes, the more I can get after them for not being up to par. But in this day and age, when they don't perceive that I care about them, because they are very seen and very heard, they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about it with their friends. They're going to talk about it with their teammates. They're going to talk about it with their parents. Now you have a community where parents have a lot of influences, and coaches are getting run out of town left and right because they don't have the perceived care, but they want to hold their kids accountable all the time. So I'm going to give you an example of how this has worked with a team that all of you know about. So the Los Angeles Dodgers. How many of you know Yasiel Puig, right? You've probably heard of Puig. Well, Puig and Coach Don Mattingly, the previous coach, previous manager, they had a kind of a contentious relationship. And even after Don Mattingly left, he didn't mince words about the fact that he felt like Puig, which is interesting because Puig came from a third world country. He has many attributes of a very entitled athlete, showing up late to practice, not working as hard as he could. So Don Mattingly didn't mince words about the fact that he thought that he was very much lacking on that level. And he even said that after he left. So he definitely has this perspective. So Dave Roberts came in, and this is from Dave Roberts' mouth because he's now the manager of the Dodgers, and he spoke to a group of coaches. And what he said was that the very first practice, he looked at the whole team, and he said, you know what? I'm not going to agree with everything you do. And then he looked at Yasiel Puig, and he said, Yasiel, I am not going to agree with all the things that you do on this field. I'm not going to agree with your work ethic, and I'm not going to agree with a lot of the ways in which you approach this game. But I want you to know that I love you. And I want that to be the most important thing in our relationship, is that you know that I love you and I care about you. And every time I see you, Yasiel, I want to give you a big hug. Right? So every time Dave Roberts sees Yasiel Puig, whether it's spring training, whether it's a game, they embrace and they hug each other. Well, I don't know if you guys know this, but the Dodgers are having the best season that they're really almost any baseball team has ever had. So to me, because of this care and because of this perception that Dave Roberts cares about his players, I can guarantee you he is holding them accountable left and right. Because there's no way you have the kind of record and the kind of a performance that they're putting out without being completely accountable. So I think that's what's missing in today's. Now that's quite a challenge. That is quite a challenge to be able to wear both hats. And one of the things that I hear parents say and I hear coaches say that I think is a complete cop-out is, I'm a coach, I'm not a friend. I'm a parent, I'm not a friend. When you're a good coach, you know when to be a friend and when to not be a friend. You know when to be a friend and when to be an authoritative figure, to be about boundaries and about holding kids accountable. A good parent knows when to have boundaries and when to be firm and when to be direct. A good parent knows when to sit next to their child and be a friend. So that's a cop-out. And I think that talks about the limited ability and the limited possibilities of that individual, when to me, I want to expand possibilities. I want coaches and I want parents to expand the possibilities that they have to place connection as more important than the desire to control kids and desire to control players. So that's the kinds of things that I like to go out and talk in the community about. I like to help kids with their issues, but I also like to help coaches understand that this broader array of emotional connection with kids is really at a huge part of being able to do, I think, what all coaches want to do, which is hold kids accountable and help them work hard and be the best that they can be. So that's what I do in the community, and thank you very much for letting me talk.